From Algeria to Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Bahrain, Wisconsin, and Ohio. A revolutionary process has broken out against the effects of the global systemic crisis. Dictatorships and totalitarian systems that were tolerated for so long are no longer acceptable, and people are willing to risk their lives to bring them down, if the regimes fail to cover the basic needs of the population. This process will spread internationally, and the world will either sink into chaos and a new dark age, or the bankrupt financial system will be replaced in short order by a global two-tier banking system, a Glass-Steagall standard.
It was on January 27th of this year that the FCIC Commission headed by Phil Angelides released a report which spoke of the shadow banking system, a system of derivatives, a system of gambling debts, an imperial system of the ancient model of Rome, which has brought most of our current living world into the brink of revolution against it. As you just heard from Helga Zepp-LaRouche's statement released over the weekend to the German population, the content of her title itself speaks to the truth of the matter of what the press, better known as the press, and most politicians idiotically still deny, that Egypt is everywhere. From Ohio, Wisconsin, to Bahrain, to Egypt, and growing, governments that have placed the yoke of British globalization, free trade, and monetary speculation around their own necks are being rejected. But for that reason, this system has denied the right to existence, and a youth population, primarily in these regions in northern Africa, have been placed against the edge of a cliff. The breakdown of the entire system and government's typical responses, as we see in England and their pet, the Euro currency nations and Barack Obama, are telling these youth, jump, it would be good for us. And as Helga Zepp-LaRouche rightfully put it in her statement,
people no longer see why they should accept conditions that leave them no options. The hunger riots of 2008 were directed against high food prices. The 2011 uprisings in North Africa and Southwest Asia, as well as the mass demonstrations in Wisconsin and Ohio against attempts to smash trade unions, are reactions to the breakdown of the global financial system, and express the popular realization that without Republican freedom, people will have neither food nor hope for the future.
For this global food crisis, fed through the speculative games of London and Wall Street, Linda LaRouche and Helga have made it clear as to what should be done. Price controls on food should immediately take place, and the institutions involved in this hyperinflationary binge should be determined as engaging in crimes against humanity. Caps on food prices would contribute to the bankruptcy of Wall Street, sure. But it's the least we could do for them if prisons aren't large enough to fit all the speculators. Now, this places a key question on the table. If we reject the imposed consequences of a breakdown crisis steered by the British Empire, then what is the alternative? Better yet, perhaps we are also asking, if you can tell us what the future must look like, what do we need to make that future vision real? Aha! Once we have concerned ourselves with the processes that are required, we recognize the need to evoke the spirit of Franklin Roosevelt. Forget the witch doctors, put away that crystal ball. What we mean is the reenactment of Glass-Steagall, and that as a global standard of banking. People have rejected the policies on an international scale of what the empire is forcing upon us. But how do we really break their power? How do we fundamentally strip Wall Street's ability to steal, to enforce bailouts and the austerity that comes with it? Isn't it through their imposition and control over the monetary system as the key agent on which they act against the interests of the population? Then why not break that system, as Glass-Steagall had significantly done when it was first installed in June of 1933, and for which the same reasons that the fascist institutions that had backed Adolf Hitler rose from the swamps to the likes of Alan Greenspan to repeal the act as was finally accomplished in the 1990s. Let them eat cake and rising to the occasion of a fascist imperial threat as Roosevelt had done, we too must act now in this war against the monstrous policies created by the empire. So that's the nature of the crisis, and these are the remedies laid out by Lyndon LaRouche and Helga Zepp LaRouche. The rest lies on our shoulders. And let's not make the same mistake we've been making for the past 4 decades and rely on the same people and officials who have betrayed us for the past 40 years. As you can see from Egypt to Wisconsin, the rest of the world's population have already broken from that trend. Just look at what these people, who shamelessly call themselves representatives of the people, have to show in light of the breakdown crisis and global revolts. Let's take the just concluded G20 meeting in Paris, for example, where a bunch of meaningless words were exchanged, but not a single ember of good was intended. Reportedly, in its final communique after the meeting, the group of G20 finance chiefs concluded that they have discussed the concerns and consequences of potential commodity price volatility and that they have planned to work with international organizations to report on the underlying challenges posed by these trends of price volatility. I guess that's one way of changing the subject from what is obviously a systemic collapse to a meaningless problem about mere prices. But some aren't even going to entertain the idea of beating around the bush and just go straight for the throat, demanding wage freezes and starvation. Like a modern version of Marie Antoinette, who was known for her infamous line, "Let them eat cake," when told that the French population is starving from lack of bread, we have today our own modern reincarnation of Madame Antoinette, ECB head Jean-Claude Trichet. We admit it's a slight downgrade from the original, but we assure you it's the real thing. In an interview with the French-language Europe 1 station on Sunday, Madame Trichet, in response to the food crisis and global uproar, pointed his nose upward and remarked that there is nothing he will do about the food prices, that wages be frozen and austerity be continued.
There is nothing we can do against the rise in oil and commodity prices, but we must avoid at all costs second-round effects, including on salaries. To increase wages would be the stupidest thing to do.
Trichet then went straight for the neck, calling for the continuation of unflinching austerity while using the age-old bait that a recovery demands sacrifice.
Cutting deficits is a necessity. The absolute common sense is to say that if we want growth and jobs, we must be prudent.
Overall, in contrast to the only sane voices coming out of Europe, that of Helga Zepp LaRouche's and political ally Jacques Cheminade, everyone else has qualified themselves for the insane asylum, or has brought about the urgent need for the Eurozone to found a separate resting home under the title An Asylum for the Incompetent. Worse than a blind eye, most European politicians, and worse, Obama, display an utter commitment to the monetary empire's desire. So should we sit back and see where the tide turns? Or should we too give up our mistaken beliefs and fears over money and fight for Glass-Steagall? What is left for us in the United States, let alone the world's population, if we do not fight for that policy? Void of leadership and a reluctance to speak in terms of reality, the Catholic Archbishop of Tripoli, Giovanni Martinelli, put squarely on the table the reality that youth know they are presented with: no future. Interviewed on the daily La Stampa, he warns, though not specifying Glass-Steagall, that in general, the situation can still be saved from a bloody civil war, commenting this after reviewing the circumstances in Libya. He said that margins to avoid serious danger exist, but that political leaders must meet the demands of a youth population that are reacting to the fact that the current global system has stripped them of the simple right to life. In his words,
"The youth frustration comes from their rights and their requests being not fulfilled. A generational revolt similar to our '68 adds to the rage because of the difficulty of finding a house and building a family by young people who see it impossible to find a house and build a family. The rage of young people prevented from fulfilling the obligation of marriage."
From his involvement during the run-up to the War for Independence from the British Empire, Alexander Hamilton strived not simply for the right, but for the success of establishing a sovereign nation. The sovereign nation acts in the interest of the general welfare. The sovereign nation is a government whose dearest companion is the belief in securing the common defense and the right to the pursuit of happiness for the posterity of a people. The sovereign nation and the people who govern seek for nothing more than to achieve the immortality of his state. But when the nation gives up sovereignty to an arbitrary power with its own interest of greed, selfishness, evil, genocide, and plain murder, the pursuit for such immortality is compromised and soon vanishes. This, a people cannot tolerate for very long, and it's a reality that we are witnessing today. However, as Alexander warned, mobs can turn deadly if the nation refuses to act. Should we not recognize the great opportunity that has landed on our shoulders? The people are revolting against a murderous British monetary empire that for too long has denied even a glance of immortality to the population of the globe. Their system has failed, but where does the true failure lie? Is it on their part to maintain the inherently failed structure? Or is it those of ours who out of fear and stubborn ignorance refuse to act for what the time calls for? That's your report for now. Stay tuned for further updates, including tonight's nightly report. This is Hector Rivas. Till tomorrow morning.